Welcome to The Wire. This is Siddharth Varadarajan. The Army Chief's comments day before yesterday on Jammu and Kashmir, said in the context of an encounter which saw army casualties, has created a huge controversy. The opposition parties have read his comments as, have said his comments are highly insensitive, inflammatory. The comments that he made essentially seemed like he was warning the local population that has not just been ambivalent about many of these encounters between militants and the army, but have often resorted to stone pelting or other forms of obstruction during army action. And Bipin Rawat, the army chief's comments, have been seen as a warning to people not to get involved, to stay away and to not do anything to hinder army operations. And if they do, he more than amply suggests that they would be placing themselves in harm's way. As the opposition has attacked General Rawat, the government has defended him. And joining me today to discuss General Rawat's comments and the political controversy is Dr. Manoj Joshi, well-known journalist, author of a book on Kashmir, and of course currently a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and also a columnist at The Wire. Manoj, welcome to this discussion. We will start with General Rawat's comment itself, the principal one. And I'll just read it out for clarity's sake for our viewers. We would now request the local population that people who have picked up arms, and they are the local boys, if they want to continue with the acts of terrorism, displaying flags of ISIS and Pakistan, then we will treat them as anti-national elements and go helter-skelter for them. They may survive today, but we will get them tomorrow. Our relentless operations will continue. Pretty strong stuff. What do you think he had in mind?
You know, I think there was an element of anger and frustration. It is true that when some of these encounters are taking place, that civilians, locals gather and they raise slogans and protests. And yes, there's an element of brinksmanship involved there, because a shooting event is taking place, and those soldiers are being kind of crowded by the crowd, as it were. And so I think basically it was his frustration at that, because it's a kind of a ready-made situation for a greater disaster.
So we're talking about an encounter happening in a sort of residential or a rural area where you have habitation, and perhaps the army is zeroing in on a particular house or compound, and residents around are kind of expressing their anger, disquiet, or support for militants, even as the army is shooting, right?
Yeah.
That's the scenario we're talking about.
That's the scenario. So, you have a situation where a crossover is taking place, in the sense you have civil protest, sometimes violent civil protest, which when you look at stone pelting, I call it violent civil protest, because it is by unarmed people, but then stones can also be pretty
absolutely
damaging. So you have violent civil protest and you have an actual militant action taking place. Guns are firing, etc. So what's happening here is that the violent civil protest is moving towards the militant
zone of that action,
of militant action. And this is the point where something could go wrong, in the sense, you have guns, bullets ricochet. Many people don't realize how even a leaf can ricochet a bullet. And so you can have, let's say, a situation where a large number of civilians, those protesters get killed, whether they get killed by a burst from the militant side or from the army side. Yeah. But it is a recipe made for disaster. And I think basically, and of course, it is frustrating for the army people, because in their book, they would much rather have the support of the locals. But that support has not been forthcoming for two reasons. One is that many of the militants now are actually locals.
Yeah, we're seeing images from these funerals. I mean, even when militants or extremists crossed over from the Pakistani side, locals tended to throng to their funerals. But some of these recent funerals of local boys have seen huge gatherings.
See, because now the Pakistani numbers have receded, and locals have become once again more involved. Nowhere near what it was in the 1990s or in the early 2000s, but still the numbers are growing. So one is the one reason is the frustration with regard to that. The second is that I think the state, the government, the authorities conflate violent civil protest with not just militancy but terrorism. So when you look at violent civil protests, they say all these guys are terrorists. So anyone throwing a stone, raising a flag, waving a flag, he's a terrorist.
And that's the army chief's comments seem to suggest that he's conflating all of these things in his mind as well.
He's conflating all these things in his mind. Now that is dangerous because that guy is not a terrorist. Meaning if someone waves the flag, even if it's a Pakistani flag, so what? You know, that we actually...
No, I mean, many would find it objectionable, but
in
terms of...
many will find it objectionable, but the point is, under Indian laws, I don't think, you know, you would be able to find any section of the Indian law which would say that that's a crime.
Right.
I can understand. I think maybe ISIS, if it has been declared a unlawful organization, maybe waving their flag could be a crime. But even then, I don't think it's a crime of such magnitude that you can shoot a person.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is that this analytical inability to understand the difference between violent civil protests, militancy, and
now in your Manoj, in your writings for us, you've often argued that the Indian state in the past has made a distinction between terrorism and militancy, and you believe that this distinction is important, and if you don't make that distinction, you can err in terms of policy. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on why you think the two are different categories?
You see, in my book and in the book of most rational people, a terrorist is someone who wantonly attacks non-combatants, unarmed people, civilians. So he deliberately targets them. A militant, on the other hand, normally targets instruments of the state, meaning army, police, etc., and does not target civilians deliberately. Yes, civilians can be killed by a militant attack, but likewise, when you are countering a militant, civilians can, you know, crossfire people can get killed. Now, the two are different. The two, it's important to see the differences between the two because obviously, I think most people realize that it's impossible to negotiate with the terrorists. And I think we learnt our lesson with Prabhakaran. That is that the terrorist is a person who have 100% demand and sometimes irrational demands. Meaning, if someone says that, you know, there should be, Islam should rule the world, you know, no, that's there's nothing to negotiate in that kind of demand. So, whereas a militant often has a known objective, he may have a separatist objective. He may want to separate his part of India from India, set up a separate state entity. He may have some other kinds of demands, reservation or something like that. And in the past, India has negotiated with militants. We have negotiated with the Naga militancy. Mr. Dobal himself led the negotiation with the NSC and IM. Now the NSC and IM was...
And brought it to a successful conclusion as per official...
And the Naga militancy is the oldest of our insurgencies.
Right.
See? And they've killed a lot of our soldiers. Meaning if you go back, some of the ambushes and have been very, very deadly. But yet the Indian state, you know, kind of bit the bullet and decided to negotiate with them. And then, of course, the whole issue of the ceasefire in 2000, when the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government set out to negotiate with the Hizbul Mujahideen.
Right.
See?
Right. And Kamal Pandey was actually, Home Secretary was sent to Srinagar, and there was this picture of him with these masked guys who were the Hizbul Mujahideen representatives.
Absolutely. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are able to separate these analytically, then you can say, well, we can do something about militancy. We can bring them around politically, you know, and the terrorists cannot be brought around to the outside the pale. But when you say that everyone, meaning everyone from a flag waver, everyone who raises his voice, who says that I want Kashmir is not a part of India, is a terrorist, then you're in trouble, because like that, then you'd have to wipe out half of Nagaland and half of many other parts of India, particularly in the northeast.
Right. Manoj, the issue which the army chief was objecting to, which is of civilians crowding an encounter zone and showing their support for militants or opposing the army, has been a problem with many counterinsurgency operations that the army has dealt with in Kashmir for the last decade and a half. I was talking to, I think the last time this became a big issue, I was talking to one of the counterinsurgency experts, and he said, look, we've dealt with this 10, 12 years back. What's changed that has led the army chief to employ somewhat strident language, somewhat menacing language?
Well, the thing is that we had very high casualties, I think up to between 1996 and approximately 2004, 2005. If you look at the casualties, they're all above 500, the security forces.
Right.
And then they went down sharply.
From 04 onwards, roughly,
yeah.
Huh? Okay.
And they went down to, I think in 2012 it was 16 or 17. So the situation had dramatically improved.
Good.
And now what is happening is you're finding an uptick. And the uptick is coming because the army can deliver so much. In the sense, the army has the counter-militancy operations. You have wiped out, you have effectively wiped out armed militancy. Because it's from the kind of high that I spoke of, killing 600, 650 security personnel a year down to 17. But now...
So militancy as a challenge to the state has effectively been contained.
It has been contained. Yeah. But the problem is that the second part of it, which is very important, which is the political part of it,
right.
The political negotiation with what gives rise to the militancy, which is the separatist movement. You still need a political negotiation with them.
Right.
And that political negotiation has gone on fitfully.
Right.
No one has really... Actually, there's a three-way negotiation. Yeah. We have to also deal with Pakistan.
But when you say political strategy, in a way that's separate from the winning hearts and minds, or it's a component of winning hearts and minds?
Well,
in terms of at least getting the civilian population on your side, right?
See, it is a component of hearts and minds in a larger sense. But I'm saying in a strategic sense, when you have to deal with the Kashmiri separatists. Now we know that yes, okay, the separatists are in the valley. Valley has a huge population. And whatever you may do anywhere else, at the end of the day, you got to make some kind of a deal with that separatist movement in the valley. You can't kill them all. It's simply not.
And the agenda for governance that BJP signed with the PDP, yes. In fact, explicitly talks of having that kind of a political negotiation.
So that unfortunately that has not been happening.
Yeah.
That has not been happening, and so the security forces have a Sisyphean task in front of them. They roll the rock up, and then the rock comes rolling back.
Right.
And they do it again and again and again. So that breeds
because of the civilian leadership in a way not delivering on the political part of this. Yes. There was this interview that Rajnath Singh gave to the Indian Express. Our mutual friend Sheila Bhatt interviewed him, and she asked him a whole bunch of stuff, including on J&K, when she said, look, the government hasn't really been active in finding a political solution. And he said, we've done a lot of things. And she said, such as what? And he said, we've done a whole list. I will send you the details, which clearly meant that he didn't have whatever they've done, that information on his fingertips, because they haven't done much. If you look at the record of this government, in a way, signing the agenda for governance with PDP marked a bold, dramatic beginning where they essentially embraced a party that the BJP spokespersons in the past used to call soft separatists. And you say we're going to have negotiations with separatists, and there's a reference to the Hurriyat in that in a way. Mufti Muhammad was very committed to this, but he passed away, and the current CM doesn't have the kind of heft to push that point with the Modi government. But where do you see the BJP's own attitude towards the political settlement in J&K? Do they at all consider this important, or do they think, based on what the army chief has said, that they really are seriously thinking of finding pure military means to this issue?
See, I think BJP is caught in a bit of a dilemma. As you know, famously, the BJP does not, one of the three key political articles they have is the removal of Article 370. Yeah. So they do not support the idea of autonomy in any case in Jammu and Kashmir. So you're right that and that was done by Mr. Modi incidentally, that he insisted that we do this deal with PDP because that's the only logical and useful outcome that kept a certain amount.
And he sent Ram Madhav, who was ex-RSS or from RSS. Ram Madhav negotiates that deal. So you have to assume there was some political buy-in to that document.
There was a political buy-in into that, and I think, but it also kept peace till as long as Mufti Muhammad Saeed was around.
Yeah.
You see, the problems have begun thereafter. So, so one is the question of the BJP's strategic, attitude towards this, the issue of Article 370 and autonomy.
Yeah.
The second problem is the BJP or the BJP's bureaucrats, or let me say officials who work for the BJP government, whose attitude towards counterinsurgency. I think they think that counterinsurgency does not involve hearts and minds at all.
Is this the so-called Doval doctrine, or a part of it?
Doval doctrine that relentless military pressure is the only way out in these circumstances. I'm afraid that's simply not true.
I mean, we've been there, done that, as you said, and the problem re-emerges after some time.
It re-emerges after some time because and that is strange because Mr. Doval played such an important role in bringing Mizoram around and as a covert operative, and he knows very well that all those covert operatives eventually became, all those Mizo separatists became Mizo politicians.
Right.
So that has to be the goal of any policy in Kashmir, that those militants actually become local politicians and will adopt political means rather than military means to
pursue whatever agenda they have.
Agenda they have. So I think that there's a failure. There's a failure in imagining the counterinsurgency doctrine. But the important failure is the political. See, because as I said, that the armed forces or the police are instruments of the state, and if the state continues to fail, these guys will be thrown into the breach, because after all, who dies? It's the army guy who dies, it's the policeman who dies. The politician doesn't pay the cost.
So we have a question that's come in from Facebook. Suhas Paradkar says that the army chief appears to be too loose-tongued, and essentially he's asking whether the army chief has in a way spoken out of turn or said things that are inappropriate.
I would not be so harsh on the army chief, because the army chief is very new, and invariably what happens is that the army is not encouraged to talk as it is. The 15 Corps, which is in Srinagar, the 15 Corps commander historically has had certain amount of leeway, in being able to hold forth. But in this case, I would say the army chief is very new. He may not have anticipated the kind of reaction, because he is now the army chief. You see, if he had been the corps commander and he had said this somewhere on the side, maybe people would not have noticed it to this extent. But being the army chief, everyone's come down on him on this issue because of the position he holds. So I would say that yes, he's somewhat new in the job. He said certain things. He didn't weigh his words carefully. Perhaps he should have weighed them carefully. And this all said and done, this is a tactical operation. The army chief need not have spoken at all. He should have left
the corps commander.
The corps commander to say whatever he had to say.
Yeah, and I suppose the government also compounded this problem by leaping into the fray. We had the statement by Kiren Rijiju, who has made a habit of mouthing off on all sorts of things.
But the thing that is the problem with people like Rijiju or with Parekar and others, is that they sometimes they don't even comprehend the issues that are involved. For them, they speak their conversation in terms of labels. This is anti-national. This is national. This is nationalism. This is anti-nationalism. This is terrorist. This is so and so. So they tend to speak in that. It's actually their illiteracy which is showing up. It's their illiteracy which shows up, and the illiteracy eventually becomes incompetence. And so you find that these people are simply not competent in doing what they're supposed to do. And this is the problem we are finding with this government, that you have all Mr. Modi's instincts are great. He wants to do great things. He wants to transform this country. But he's simply not finding the wherewithal. All his advisors, etc., so whoever advised him on demonetization or something like that, they didn't know what they were talking about. And so the result is that we are kind of floundering in a range of areas, from Kashmir to the demonetization of the economy, you name it. And there's a sense that the whole system is floundering, and it's just hanging on because of Modi's personal appeal, his charisma, as it were, his enormous support amongst the public,
Right.
who are still willing to give him the benefit of doubt.
Right. There was a briefing recently by a senior government official which came in one of the papers where they were trying to, in a way, put out that India will continue to stick to its policy, the government will stick to its policy of not engaging with Pakistan until, essentially the line that talks and terror cannot continue. It would seem over the last 2-3 months that whatever acts of terror or violence that we've seen in J&K do not necessarily have an easy or close link to state actors in Pakistan, or for that matter, the Pakistani state for domestic reasons has also begun to move against people like Hafiz Saeed. The pressure in a way is mounting from the US, and even domestically, the horrible attack we saw in Sehwan Sharif, the Lal Qalandar shrine. Is it your sense that things may finally be moving in Pakistan in a right direction from the point of view of the political leadership and the military establishment, and that maybe 3, 4, 5 months down the road, India may again be looking at the possibility of engagement with the Pakistani government on the whole range of bilateral issues, but also confidence building vis-a-vis J&K?
Definitely. I think that very much a possibility, and because with Pakistan, that's how it works usually. But don't forget that there are still people in Pakistan, and this has been a pattern going back a long time, at least till since Mr. Vajpayee's time, that we are able to find interlocutors in Pakistan. We do move, but every time we move, a terrible terrorist attack takes place, and there's a setback. And because the problem is that the government in New Delhi is unable to deal with the emotional response. And this problem has become worse since 26/11.
Right.
26/11 is the watershed, in the sense that after 26/11, a lot of people who had some kind of sympathy for Pakistan, or some felt that we could deal with Pakistan, have also become skeptical, because the Pakistanis have refused to move in the 26/11 case. Meaning, yes, they arrested 4 guys, but after that, they've been kind of obfuscating issues, and so people in India are not even willing to give Pakistan the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
They simply say, guys, do something,
Right.
and in something which there is a lot of evidence,
Yeah.
because they would never have arrested those 4 guys had they not had evidence of their own.
Exactly. Which they did, yeah.
Even
we know from the NIA the FI investigation in Pakistan that they actually put together
so
stuff.
even that gentleman who was the Siddiqui, or who was the police chief who had written a piece after his retirement.
Khosa, Tariq Khosa, I think. Of the
not Tariq Khosa.
of NIA? Somebody else, okay, I'm confusing it then.
So they have a lot of evidence, and plus, if they had a cooperative attitude, they would give us voice samples. Instead of kind of getting on their high horse.
Yeah.
So we need to get a clear signal that yes, Pakistan has made that strategic shift.
Okay. We have a question from Shoaib Rafiq, rather unfair in my view, but I'm going to read the question out. He says that this discussion is doing exactly what the state has ever done and dealt with Kashmir. Why do people support militants and pelt stones at tools of the Indian state which are controlling them at the helm of a gun? The best and sane would be to accept Kashmir as a political problem, a disputed region, and to engage Kashmiris of all sides to the discussion, throw away the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, do away with the immense amount of military presence from civilian areas, and release young boys and political prisoners. So that's, if you like, this is a commonly held view in J&K.
The point is, I don't disagree with most of those points. Meaning, I too think that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act should have been done away with a long time ago. As far as the political part is concerned, I hope I have been saying the political part of it. But they must first, and that's what Vajpayee was trying, there was a ceasefire. Let Hizbul Mujahideen declare a formal ceasefire. Let Sayyid Salahuddin declare that. Because right now you have armed men there.
Right.
They have armed men who are taking on the instruments of the state. So I would not advocate a unilateral movement
to withdraw
the armed forces from there.
I mean, as long as you have attacks from the other from militants, you'll have to have somebody to engage. You have
to have something there. So I would not advocate that. But certainly, I would think that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is a monstrosity. It has no business to be instituted there. So it should be, and as far as releasing people concerned, I think yes, there is the kind of violence we are talking about has declined so sharply that you probably have no cause to be holding people, under the Preventive Detention Act or whatever it is. So I don't basically disagree with many of the points that he has made.
Right. Well, that wraps up this discussion on Jammu and Kashmir, triggered by the Army Chief's recent comments. As I said, comments led to a huge controversy which really go to the heart of how the Indian state plans to deal with the problem of Kashmir. As we've seen, there is a military challenge that the Indian state faces, but there is above all a political challenge, and that it's time that the government got serious about addressing the political basis of the conflict in Jammu and Kashmir. On that note, thank you very much for watching.